2, 1.
Action. Happy birthday!
Thank you so much.
You are 35 today.
I am not.
You're right.
I'm 34 today.
You're 34 because we're recording this in September.
Well, I'm actually 33
Oh, you're 30
now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm not older. I refuse.
You tried to age me before, so this is payback.
This is ageism. I don't appreciate it.
So you are 34 today. We're letting you behind the curtain a little bit. We're recording this in September, but
December 9th is the release date.
This
which
is going
means,
to air on your birthday.
Yes, I'm officially in my mid-30s.
Do you have any fun plans yet?
I don't. Have not thought that far ahead.
For your birth month?
For my birth month. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm the person that works on his birthday. I've never really been take a ton of time and reflect on my birth.
You and I are different.
Yeah.
We're both different that way.
I think every year what I've done in the past is I usually block some time that weekend to get away, go for a hike, get lost in the woods. So I don't doubt that weekend I'll probably be in a cabin somewhere with Apollo, hiking, putting the boots on, enjoying the cooler weather. And I usually reflect on life in that way, but I'm definitely not the 34 let's rage.
How long until you were like that on your birthday? I'm just curious.
I was never a rage birthday person. Yeah.
Okay.
I was always kind of a more reflective birthday person. I worked a lot in high school too.
Yeah.
I think the only birthday of mine that was really actually crazy was my 21st.
Your 21st.
And it's because I turned 21 December of senior year at Pitt. And it was also...
Was this F Finals Friday?
It was F Finals Friday.
How did I know it?
And so it was a bunch of seniors that were already 22, and there was over 80 people at the bars with us.
Wow.
We had a posse.
That's a great day.
And so that one was fun. I definitely drank a lot more alcohol than I would ever recommend anybody drink. I did not black out or throw up though. So,
wow, that's impressive.
I did eat a lot of pizza.
I'm glad to hear that you've always been this nice reflective guy, because I am also very reflective on my birthday, but it always manifests as an existential crisis.
Especially with what you're going to be. Are you 29
Doesn't
coming up?
matter. And
I think
no,
so.
It's going to be 28.
I don't know. 29 finish line is coming faster than you know.
No. I'm 27. You did this to me last year.
You carry yourself so much older, you know?
Thanks, I think. Well, today, because it's your birthday, we're going to do another edition of Ask Andrew Anything.
I love that.
With a twist.
Okay.
Are you ready? Because we know you like to talk. It's not a bad thing. But we're going to limit you to 3 minutes on the clock. So there will be a buzzer.
Hey, I've been working on being more concise.
I believe you.
No time like the present to test it out.
Just fine.
I have faith.
It's going to be awkward, though, if you run out of time.
If I run out of time, and then we just have to cut the topic.
Then we're just done.
Oh.
We're calling it right then.
Okay.
And if people are interested in the topic, then I want them to let us know in the comments.
Ooh, see, that's kind of fun. So because this is the last episode of season 4, which is really cool to be wrapping up with an episode of Ask Andrew Anything. And so we're kind of do feelers of future topics.
Yeah.
So please, all you listening, if any of these topics are things you're interested in us really going deep on, comment, message, email, however you like to communicate with us, DMs, because we will plan on in season 5 in 2025, we will make it a full-blown episode.
I like it.
I don't even know what the topics are, but hey,
it's a mixed bag.
We might be doing some homework.
The internet is weird when it comes to nutrition.
I love
it just keeps getting weirder. So
our job is to just put out fires on the internet now. That's what we do for a living.
I don't hate that for us.
No, I love it. It's actually pretty entertaining.
Well, should we get started?
I am ready. Get your timer ready.
I got my notes ready.
So 3 minutes per question.
3 minutes per question. That's all you got.
I can handle that. That's going to help reduce the trauma of the people that listened to episode 1 of Ask Andrew Anything, and the first 50 minutes was my question response.
Your life story.
Good times.
We asked for it. We
had to record it at some point. It's now out there for those that need to hear it.
Well, okay. Are we ready?
I'm ready.
And seed oils, go.
Oh man, Seed oils are a really interesting one. So I've got 3 minutes to break this down, huh?
2 minutes and 56 seconds.
We are not going to go like crazy nerdy down into the world. But some things that we need to know and understand about seed oils is correlation versus causation, first of all. And so when you look at a lot of the data that's out there that's talking about how seed oils are so bad for you, it is observing like empirical data, looking at the prevalence of seed oils in food and correlating it to the prevalence of other things in society, such as predominantly obesity and diabetes. Mm-hmm. And they are very correlated, which is if you look at a year graph of the prevalence of seed oils rising, it looks very similar to that of obesity. That's where most of the data comes from. We're not looking at like intense clinical trials. We're not looking at like intense mechanistic issues. We are just looking at this big empirical data that observes that as we eat more seed oils, we seem to be getting more obese as a culture. That is not entirely surprising because all oils have, all oils are fat. Fat has 9 calories per gram, and oils are also semi-viscous liquids, so they go down real easy, right? A tablespoon of any oil has 140 calories, which when you think about 140 calories of broccoli, that would be 4 to 5 cups of it. That'd be eating 2 to 3 apples. There's a lot of foods that it takes a lot of effort. That's a deck of cards worth of protein, or like chicken breast or turkey. So seed oils largely are fine, but what I will say is that they are over-consumed in our diet. One, because we eat a lot of processed packaged little snack foods like Cheez-Its, right? They are broken down starch with very heavily refined oils, which means it's 2 things that are hyper digestible, hyper flavorful, and they go down real easy, so we overeat them. Mm-hmm. So seed oils are one of those things. They're not good or bad. They are overconsumed and they are overly prevalent in our diet, but they aren't like this secretly awful thing. And one thing I keep hearing is people saying it was a synthetic or it was a lubricant in machinery, like in the engineering world. And most oils are. Like that's not that we didn't take something from the machinery world and turn it into food, right? It's always been capable of being food. With fats, we are looking at the omega-3 versus omega-6s versus monounsaturated versus saturated. We can probably dig into that another day, but seed oils tend to have more omega-6, which means the rest of your diet better have the other things, the omega-3s. That can come from things like nuts and seeds and fish, the MUFAs, which are your monounsaturateds, avocados, and the nuts as well. And then what seed is another conversation, right? Things like avocado oils and olive oils versus when you look at corn versus cottonseed. Oh, there it is. So there you have it. Do not run away from them aggressively, but there's definitely some considerations in how to balance them.
Well done. That was really good.
Hey. That was the first one.
Covered a lot of content. 3
minutes. We got through that. That could definitely be an episode.
Yeah.
We'll dig in and we'll go into like the ratios and all sorts of things about fat. I honestly, as a sidebar, think our nutrition label that taught people about unsaturated fats and saturated fats is cool, but like most people don't realize there's over 2,000 types of saturated fat. Not all saturated fats are the same. Not all.
All right, save it for the episode.
No, I was gonna say we need to dig into that, right?
That's definitely something.
That's one of those things. Like I feel like people need to better understand fats as like a whole.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good. Ready for the next one?
I'm ready. Let me take a sip of coffee.
I'm sorry. I feel like I'm being really mean.
You're not. You're just a very, very nice person. Have you seen that one meme? I sent this to my one buddy. It's people pleasers be setting normal boundaries and acting like they're in their villain era. That's what this is. Like you're just a people pleaser. You think you're in your villain era.
Giving you a time.
Yeah, asking me to be like appropriately concise. Yeah.
All right. Are we ready?
Let's do it.
Probiotics.
Ooh.
Are they actually helpful?
A lot of the times, yes, but maybe. So probiotics are definitely way over marketed now. Right. It's my favorite one. If you're in the Pittsburgh area and you've ever listened to the radio, there was the True Biotics commercial years ago that was like, you might not be fat, you might just be bloated. True Biotics. And I like wanted to literally drive my car off a cliff when I heard that. Your gut has a ton of bacteria in it, particularly in the lower quadrants of the gut. Those bacteria are intensely responsible for a lot of things. They help you digest food, they help you process things. They're also the preceptors to a lot of things like serotonin production and vitamin activation. They are very, very important. So I cannot emphasize enough that our gut microbiome is extremely important. A probiotic supplement is an attempt to support that. So think of if your gut microbiome is a city, it's the city of New York, right? And there are millions of people. There are actually trillions of bacteria in your gut. And there are, on average, about 500 species. So just like in New York City, there's the Wall Street workers, the firemen, the police officers, the hipster record guy, the hot dog dude, there's all the people. Same thing. A lot of times we take probiotics and they're just a one strain probiotic. So one of 500 strains.
Lactobacillus acidophilus.
Yeah. And then from there, there's also the quantity conversation, which is like a yogurt has 2 million cultures out of trillions. And so, that'd be like putting one new fireman in New York City. Is that a bad thing? No. But is it like revolutionizing New York City? No, not really. And so probiotics as a supplement, they're a part of an overarching gut conversation. I think that the other comment I'll make is a lot of gut problems happen above, right? So probiotics exist in the large intestine and the lower part of the small intestine. Well, like your stomach is the place that if you're stressed, doesn't secrete acid and doesn't break down food properly. The upper part of your small intestine is what makes enzymes. Your stomach digesting and your intestines breaking things down and absorbing are the precursors to what your gut microbiome eats. And so if you're eating better foods, you're going to digest better. If you're eating in better parameters, you're going to digest better. And that's going to lead to the gut microbiome receiving different food. And so once again, a supplement is not likely to go in and just like completely revolutionize that, but it could be a very helpful part of an overarching protocol where we're looking at meal patterning and meal timing, maybe de-stressing to help the stomach, maybe supplementing enzymes to help the intestine. And then we look at the gut microbiome and say, what can we fix? We obviously did an episode with ViTract where what they do is they actually look at your population. How many different species? What percentages of them? Are they in the right ratios? And then we can make a probiotic recommendation based on your actual imbalances. But if you're not going to change how you're eating to support that city, it's going to go back to the way it was.
Whoa! You're hot. Good timing. Good timing. Wow.
Man, I was counting to 180 in my head. I got a feel for it.
Well, we'll see how this continues. So we covered seed oils. We covered probiotics. Man, I could keep talking about probiotics too.
Yeah, that's definitely another episode. And I think we can go into like overarching gut health. What I was talking about, the elevators of the GI tract. What's your stomach supposed to do? What's your intestine supposed to do? Because to your point, when we're talking to clients, it's like, do I need a probiotic? Well, let's work downstream and like reverse engineer this. Do you need a probiotic? I like that. That'd be a fun episode.
Very cool.
Let us know in the comments.
Okay. This is a big one. What's the difference between an allergy, a sensitivity, and an intolerance? Ooh. Or are they the same thing?
Oh, this is fantastic. 3 minutes to talk about this. Allergy, sensitivity, intolerance. These are words that people use as synonyms, and they are nowhere close to synonyms. And as a result, we've created all sorts of like completely unintelligible misnomers. So, an allergy. This is your IgE, your immunoglobulin E, which is a part of your immune system. And it is the part that has access to the entire body. So when you have an IgE reaction, aka an allergic reaction, you are going to see that happen symptomatically across multiple systems. You're going to see hives. You may, God forbid, see anaphylaxis and your lungs start to shut down. It is a full body immune reaction. So that is an allergy. If it's not basically like activating other parts of the immune system, it is not an IgE reaction. A sensitivity is also an immune reaction, but it is your immunoglobulin A and your immunoglobulin G. Those tend to be more like the National Guard of our military, if you will. They're at like local systems on base places, and they have an affinity in the intestines. And so when you do a sensitivity test, you're assessing to see if foods trigger an IgA or IgG reaction in the intestine, which if in a small amount would be imperceptible, but at high amounts could cause gut inflammation and irritation. And intolerance is when you lack the appropriate enzymes to digest an ingredient in the food. So it is a non-immunologic response, which is extremely important. So let's
Give us an example.
Yeah, let's use gluten. Right? So gluten sensitivity would mean that when you eat gluten, you are having an immunoglobulin A or G response, and you're having a local inflammatory response in the intestine. Gluten intolerance is not technically a thing. So gluten intolerance is you are probably struggling to digest the carbohydrate that is in that gluten-containing food, which is likely a galactan. And that is where a lot of people, when they remove things like wheat or gluten-containing foods, they may not actually be benefiting from the gluten removal, which is a whole different side. But where this becomes really important is an allergic response, you just eliminate it, right? Like, don't risk it. A sensitivity, if the sensitivity is mild, it's not likely a big deal. It's a drop in the bucket. So if your overarching systems are good, it's going to be fine. But I would say don't eliminate it, but maybe reduce it unless it's a severe sensitivity. And intolerance, let's see if we can support you in digesting it, right? Going back to, if you think you have a gluten intolerance, but you actually have a galactan intolerance, buy Beano for $8 at Rite Aid or CVS. It is literally the galactosidase enzyme that breaks down galactans, and that may literally solve your problem.
It's a good. That was great. Wow.
Allergy, sensitivity, and tolerance.
That the enzyme conversation reminds me of Lane. Shout out Lane's bachelorette party.
Oh no.
We all, after a weekend of lots of fun things that I won't get into, had a really heavy brunch the last morning, like pancakes and French toast, and everyone came back to where we were staying and was like clutching their stomachs. And Lane just starts handing out digestive enzymes like she does.
Like she does.
So anyways, that was really well done.
That's a fun one.
Really well done. People have so many.
That's one that I wish I could scream from the rooftops, because that's we mix up those words so frequently. And the problem with mixing them up is that people don't know where they're what they're looking for. And that's something that we do very well, is we're going to dig in. Do you have a sensitivity or an intolerance? Because how we intervene with it is widely varied.
You're so right. There's so much nuance. Next. And I'm going to ask these the same way people ask us.
I like it.
So are artificial sweeteners bad for me?
Oh, man. No, they're not.
Oh, wow. People are going to be on fire in the comments.
I know. And we'll go, let's see if in 3 minutes, see if I can go through all of them. But we'll kind of group them. I guess you said artificial sweeteners.
Yep.
So I will note that that's going to refer to aspartame, saccharin, and Splenda, the big three. Equal, Sweet and Low, and Splenda as the three. We will not include monk fruit or stevia, which are what we'd call like natural, non-nutritive sweeteners. So the big three, the artificial sweeteners, there's definitely, I understand where the fear came from, right? There was evidence in some studies that showed in rats that aspartame breaks down and the metabolites, right? So when something gets digested in our body and it gets broken down into little fragments, a couple of those fragments are considered mildly carcinogenic, which means they've been correlated with cancer. But the question then is, okay, like, in humans? And the answer is no. And then also, like, at what dose? And the answer is obnoxious. And so the Sprague Dawley rats in the study, which, side note, they're rats that are like horrifically prone to tumors. And so they have a higher carcinogenic tendency than humans do by a long shot. They were fed close to their body weight in Sweet and Low. And so, like, yeah, if you're going to eat a dump truck of aspartame, then you're probably going to get cancer. But, like, I don't know a dump truck of anything that isn't going to kill you, right? So quantity is a very real conversation to have, and also level of carcinogenicity. Now, I'll also note, so saccharin and aspartame, they both break down in the body. And so they technically have metabolites. Those metabolites technically have potential carcinogenic correlation, though not in humans and not at doses that we would ever realistically see. They also will mildly raise your insulin because your body thinks that they're sugars. So there'll be a mild insulin spike, which is not necessarily a big deal. But for diabetics at high doses, you can actually get low blood sugars because your body starts to make more and more and more insulin, but there's no actual sugar. Splenda is different from the other two because it does not, so sucralose, as a side note, does not actually metabolize. It is a sugar molecule that's been chlorinated. So they put a chlorine where there used to be a hydroxide, and it basically renders it indigestible. And so it goes in as what looks like a sugar molecule and it goes out as same sugar molecule. So there's no metabolism, there's no metabolites that are potentially carcinogenic. It does spike your insulin as well, though, and since it goes straight through, it can lower your blood sugar in high doses. So at the quantity we consume them, not a big deal. Definitely not worried about the cancer-causing properties. That is a correlation where we look at the other things those people are eating. And then the last piece, I hope I have time to say it, when you do studies on things that diabetics consume, you have to ask chicken or the egg.
Oh, right under the wire.
Chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah.
Is it the diabetes that's causing them to have a heart attack, or is it the sucralose? And is it that they're consuming the sucralose because they're diabetic? And the answer is yes, the diabetes is the actual confounding variable. And so,
you could say the same thing with the correlational obesity.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Right. Do obese people, are they obese because they're consuming Diet Coke, or are obese people more likely to try and lose weight by cutting calories and therefore use diet products? Chicken or the egg, which came first? And the answer is the obesity came first. Spoiler alert. So thanks for the extra 15 seconds on that one.
Yeah, I was going to say we're cheating a little bit, but that's okay. I like to gab. All right. How much protein do we actually need in a day?
Ooh, that's a great one.
Wait. I forgot about my timer.
Okay.
Boom.
Go. Protein is definitely, it's great that it's being emphasized, but I also think that we're in a culture that already emphasized it in a lot of ways. And so we have a couple tiers. We have essential protein needs, which I think pretty much everyone in the United States gets. Like if you don't see rampant protein malnutrition, right? Kwashiorkor, the babies with the big swollen abdomens, you don't see that in the United States. And we're seeing that decrease globally in a massive way because inadequate protein is not really a thing. But there's a difference between the optimal amount of protein to survive versus the optimal amount to thrive. And then when we get into the fitness world, protein gets way promoted, which there's some value to it. And I guess the way could have been a pun intended situation. But just to give a point of reference, right? To survive, you need 0.8 grams per kilogram. Cardiovascular athletes for recovery, like if runners, bikers, swimmers, they need like 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram. Strength athletes need 1.5 to 1.8. We don't see a big difference in muscle repair, muscle growth between 1.8 grams per kilogram, 2 grams per kilogram, 2.5 grams per kilogram, and 3 grams per kilogram. And so you kind of see it sort of flatten there. The only exceptions are in studies that are in individuals with AAS, which for those that don't know, that stands for anabolic androgenic steroids, and those cause nitrogen retention. And so you will see in people that take steroids, that number goes to 3 very quickly.
Which we're not recommending.
That's not who we're talking to here, at least in this moment. So for those that are not anabolically enhanced, 1.8 grams per kilogram is all your body needs to recover properly. That is going to be roughly 0.7 or 0.8 grams per pound. So the whole thing of like, oh, you just eat a gram per pound, a body weight. It's like, well, that's an easy thing to remember, but it's definitely more protein than you need. And especially if you're talking to someone who has excess body fat or extra weight on them, you're telling them to eat an amount of protein they probably don't need. And so you might say, oh, it's a pound based on ideal body weight, and it's actually 0.8. The difference between 0.8 and 1, there's going to be no damage to the kidneys. So it becomes a game of, would you benefit from the extra protein to stay more full, or would you benefit from the extra carbs to stay more energized? Most athletes would benefit from the extra carbs at that point. The amount of times that an athlete comes in and they're pounding 300 grams of protein and 300 or 200 grams of carbs, and it's just like, flip it and you're going to feel unstoppable. And so that kind of becomes that difference. As I usually say, 1.8 grams per kilo to 2.2 grams per kilo, which is like a 0.8 to 0.9 grams per pound of ideal body weight. And then if you do eat more than that, it should be with satiety in mind. But if you're trying to get more full, you should also be asking yourself, are you eating enough vegetables and enough fiber and enough fats to like slow digestion? So.
Well done. I feel like with everyone, we could do a whole episode on this because there's
100%.
So much to talk about. All righty.
Yeah, these are great topics for us to think about for season 5.
Comment if you want us to talk about this more. Okay. In the realm of protein, true or false, you can only absorb 30 grams of protein per meal. Go.
False. Very, very, very false. And
why do people say that?
Yeah. And so what's funny is what was a very good nutrition tip has morphed and become, it's kind of like a whisper down the lane problem.
Like the original game of telephone.
Yes, the game of telephone, where like what you said in the beginning and what it's morphed into are not the same thing. The original advice of 30 grams per meal was a diet strategy to drive satiety, making sure each meal has 30 grams of protein, which slows digestion in the stomach, which slows the insulin response, which helps with blood sugar for diabetics, and usually means that a meal will give you 3 hours of satiety instead of 1 or 2 hours of satiety. So it was actually a calorie control and an energy time release strategy. Make sure you get 30 grams per meal. That somehow whispered down the lane to you can only absorb 30 grams per meal. I love to think about it this way. We have only eaten 3 times a day with consistency since 1950. So like whether you are an evolution person or a Bible person, there's about 10,000 plus years missing where humans consumed protein not 3 times a day. If you really think that when we used to eat once every couple days while we hunted, that our body was just like, whoa, that 30 grams, that's all I got, you're very, very dumb. And again, no one actually thinks it through like I just did. But once you think it through, you start to realize how preposterous that is. Our body is very opportunistic. If you have gone a long time without protein and your body needs protein, it is going to absorb an obnoxious amount of protein. And there was a recent study that came out that was not surprising to us as dietitians, but wrecked the world because it showed that people, if they consume protein once a day, were absorbing over 100 grams per at a sitting. It's like, of course they were. They were only eating then. Like our body's not just
recommending that either.
Yeah, we're not saying that that's what you should do, but can your body do it? Absolutely. We live in a society where we're blessed to be able to eat with fair frequency. And so an attempt to spread it out across a day with schedule and digestion and energy and blood sugar and all those things in mind. Sure, getting 30 to 40 grams a meal is like a pretty good like rule of thumb for most people, but it's not a ceiling. It's a floor.
I like that. Wow, we have 36 seconds left.
I figured. I was like, that was like 2.5, huh?
Well, why do people say that like your body can only absorb 30 grams? Like what happens if you get more than you need?
Yeah, so one of the observations would be if you eat extra carbohydrates, you store them as glycogen. If you get extra fats, you store them as fat, right? If you get excess protein, you do pee it out. That said, protein stays in the bloodstream as amino acids for like 24 hours. So like that's a thing. And so yes, excess protein is unnecessary. And if you're constantly over consuming, it can stress the kidneys, but we're not, overconsumption's like nowhere close to what we're talking about here.
Totally. All right, I had to give you a few extra seconds. I'll also say that if you're not consuming enough calories, like energy calories from carbs and fats, your body does something called lipogenesis or gluconeogenesis, where it just turns that amino acid into energy.
Yeah, it uses the alanine cycle to turn protein into sugar, which is metabolically inefficient, right? It costs 2 ATP to make 1 ATP.
And so it's carbs.
Yeah, and that's why it crashes your metabolism as a side note, right? People that fuel on protein, that's why the carnivore diet crashes your metabolism after 12 weeks to, at 3 to 6 month range. And it's because your body at some point isn't getting enough fat or carbs, starts to rely on protein as its like really, really inefficient backup generator, and you start to power down, and then your test levels crash. And you're like, wait, but I was such a bro. And it's just like,
we got to get that shirtless guy in the grocery store in here one of these days.
Yeah, I would love to chat with him.
Oh, I don't know what I wanted to ask about next. So again, in the realm of protein, what do you think about these like ultra processed protein supplements, protein bars, shakes, cookies? Go.
I had somebody the other day that was like, I was talking to this nutritionist and she was yelling at me because I was using a protein shake because protein shakes aren't food. And it's like, that's such a patronizing stance to take. I'm at a phase in my career where I recognize if you're taking an extreme hard stance on an ingredient, you are a very stubborn, opinionated, and short-sighted individual, right? Like that is...
Even lectins?
Yeah, especially lectins. No. But it's just like, that's such an obtuse and awkward thing to think about, right? Like, okay, protein shakes are bad. Well, like, what does bad mean?
Compared to what?
And compared to what, right? We live in this like whataboutist food, eat this, not that society where people just crap on food all the time. And as a result, like we're surprised nothing has an A+. And it's like, I hate to tell you, no one food by itself is healthy. Food is a series of puzzle pieces, and it's your job to put the puzzle pieces together to make a pretty puzzle picture. And like, is a protein shake an appropriate considerative tool for that puzzle? Yes, absolutely. Now, here's something I'll note. If you have people that are trying to calorically restrict to lose weight, for example, or calorically reduce because they're overeating and they're complaining of hunger, does chewing on the protein drive satiety better than sipping on the protein? Yes. Just like eating an apple drives satiety better than drinking apple juice, right? Mastication, the art of chewing, stimulates leptin in our brain and makes us feel more satisfied. And so if I'm trying to get somebody to feel more full, I am not going to just tell them to guzzle down 50 grams of protein as a shake. I'm going to first try and make sure they're prioritizing protein and fiber at meals, and they're taking time to chew their food and having appropriate fats, all of that. Mm-hmm. But if we're talking about the reality that it's either get the protein or not, a protein shake is going to be a fantastic tool. Or we're talking about an on-the-go reality. Or we're talking about someone that doesn't have massive hunger in the morning but likes to sip on a smoothie. There are ways to use that puzzle piece to make a very pretty puzzle. Protein shakes are chicken breast in a blender, as a way to think about it. And gross. So it's, yeah, I know, it's a beautiful thought. But when it's also, you wouldn't just eat chicken breast by itself. So maybe like give it some friends, put some blueberries in, put some spinach, some oats, some nut butters, make a smoothie out of it. And so overarching, I think that they can be very valuable. I will note the essential amino acids that are in these protein powders, which are the 9 aminos that we can't make, so it's like why we eat protein, are much higher than most foods, which is not a bad thing, especially in the world of GLP-1s now, where people don't have huge appetites and are protein malnourished. They become almost essential at that point, right? You're going to be wasting in cachexic on those meds without some sort of liquid protein nutrition. So again, good or bad? No, they're not good or bad. They're a tool in the toolbox that you can absolutely use.
Wow. You're really killing it on these.
Okay. I've been practicing.
A tool in the toolbox we can use. I like it. What do you think about things like ashwagandha for stress relief? My herbalist said it's really good.
Oh, yeah? What's an ashwagandha?
I don't have an herbalist. Go.
Someone said ashwagandha the other day, and I said, God bless you. No, ashwagandha, and this is, man, we're getting into the world of like neurotransmitters, which like I could definitely, I wrote my pathophysiology paper in my master's on neurotransmitters, on 5-HTP and GABA. We'll have to dig into that someday. Ashwagandha is really interesting. It is actually very, very safe to take. It does not conflict with like most psychological meds, which is kind of neat. And it does bind to cortisol. And so in the world now, everyone's talking about cortisol. It's like one of the latest buzz terms because we're starting to recognize that one of the reasons for a lot of our issues is stress in our society. So let's reverse engineer for a moment. We live in this society where people work way too much, sleep way too little, deprioritize self. And so they're in a constant state of busy. And so they may say, I'm not stressed because they think you're calling them weak. But really, we're just saying you are busier than your nervous system would like to be. So it has to recruit help in the form of adrenaline, right? You're running on adrenaline. And I'm not the pot calling the kettle black. I've been living with an IV of adrenaline for most of my 20s. And so I get it. But our society is very adrenaline focused. It's why we abuse caffeine. It's also why we have a lot of digestive issues. Cortisol is the precursor that tells the adrenal gland to make adrenaline. So cortisol is not actually a problem. So when people are like, my cortisol is the problem, no, you're blaming the messenger. You're the problem. Your inability to time manage is the problem. Your attitude about your sense of life is the problem. If you choose to look at your life as stressful and overwhelming, your physiology will respond to that. The cortisol is just the part going from the brain to the adrenal gland saying, we need more adrenaline. And so ashwagandha can bind to cortisol and inhibit it so it cannot tell adrenaline to spike. That is a very cool thing to interrupt. I think that's a good pattern interrupt. That's what I like to call the short work, right? Let's get your stress down. while we do the real work, which is, why are you so ridiculously stressed in the first place?
Why is your life like this?
And to be fair, some people, it's something they can actually change. Like, I was working way too many hours and I had the ability to change that. Some people, it's their lives are literally that busy, but you can still change how you perceive it, which is something I do now. I still have a very busy life, but an inbox that used to give me panic attacks is now a blessing, not a curse. And that is my choice. And so you can hear where it's like, that's a lot of perspective overhaul that needs to happen. That doesn't happen overnight. That is like a year or two in therapy with coaching kind of situation. So while we're working on your stress management and time management and attitude and perspective, ashwagandha can be a very helpful way to keep the cortisol at bay in the short term. So I think ashwagandha is pretty neat.
Are you seeing my phone somehow? You've been very good. All right, this is the last one from our 3-minute series. And then I want to do a little bit of rapid fire.
Okay.
And if people like it, maybe it'll be a recurring segment.
Okay.
Maybe it won't.
Rapid fire is the hardest thing for me to do. So I'm passing this current challenge. I'm excited for the next level.
Don't worry, I'll pass it back to me in one of these episodes.
Yeah, I think season 5 is going to start off with Would Devon Do It Rapid Fire Edition. And you're not even going to explain yourself. I'm going to ask some super triggering stuff. It's going to be great.
Oh, man.
I'm going to have all Christmas to think about it, too, so I'll come prepared. Love that for me.
Well,
anywho,
we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
We'll talk about it. You're going to have to run it past the marketing team? Is that what you're telling me?
The marketing team, I don't know if we can get their approval. I don't know.
Interesting.
Okay, last one.
Okay.
What do you think about fasting as a tool for longevity? I know we've talked about it in terms of like, is it an effective weight loss strategy? Yeah. But what about for longevity specifically? Go. Cool.
Yeah, like you said, we dug into it from a metabolism perspective in our episode on intermittent fasting. From a longevity perspective, it is still very much being observed. So I'll say a couple things. There is definitely a difference between time-restricted eating and fasting, which is, I think, something that most people confuse, right? So eating in an 8-hour window, 16/8, that's not really fasting, right? That's time-restricted eating. That was called fasting because it was observed in rats, and mice, I apologize. Mice enter ketosis at 16 hours. Humans take about 72 hours because our metabolism is that much slower, which is why we live that much longer. That's the part that we're interested in, right? So that's the hook is, wait a second, slower metabolisms live longer, right? Tortoises live forever. Whales live forever, and their metabolisms are super slow. Animals like mice have very short lives. Their metabolisms are very, very fast. Dogs, they don't have a long life because their metabolism. So what we're studying is the effect that metabolism has, or its correlation with longevity and how they intersect. Consumption is absolutely a part of that conversation. Constantly eating definitely stresses systems, but we're not yet at a point where we're talking about fasting, right? We're talking about caloric excess.
Yeah.
I'm saying all this to say that most of the data to date doesn't show us that fasting actually enhances longevity. It's actually caloric restriction or caloric appropriateness, right? So if you are eating just under what you need or right at what you need, right? No matter if you're eating it all in one pile or you're eating it across 6 piles, it doesn't seem to matter. One of the big words that everyone talks about right now is autophagy, right? Or autophagy for those that are reading it and haven't heard it before. That is the process of cell destruction and cell breakdown. There is no evidence that fasting increases autophagy, like at all. Our body's doing that 24/7 all the time. And so what we're looking at is there was some initial theories, the autophagy thing, that's been like very debunked. There is some merit in the observation that your telomeres, which are the little ends of your DNA, so like on a shoe like this, where like I've got my little shoestring end, we have little things on the end of our DNA called telomeres. Those degrade, and it's why we're mortal. Telomere degradation seems to slow if there's during periods of prolonged fasting, which is interesting, but it's hard to tell if that actually equates to added life. And it's also to say it's not a more is better thing. There's at some point where fasting leads to such a level of deprivation that we're actually accelerating that because we can't take care of our DNA. And so what we're watching is kind of a
finish your thought.
I was going to say, yeah, what we're watching is kind of a balancing act on a tightrope, where it doesn't seem to be specifically fasting, but it's not eating too much and not eating too often. But that doesn't mean less is more exclusively, essentially.
Yes, that like deductive reasoning, I feel like it doesn't always apply in other facets of life and science as it does in nutrition. Nutrition is so nuanced.
Well said.
And yeah, it's like you could protect your telomeres at what cost? Losing lean body mass, having a disordered relationship with food, you know.
Yeah.
Not
eating too much kills you faster, and eating too little kills you faster. It's a bell curve. And so that's where we're on that tightrope, and we're trying to find what that sweet spot is. And it's overarching. It's some level of, it's not restriction as much as it's moderation, but how you choose to moderate. Are you someone that just eats a very appropriate amount very consistently? Or are you someone that doesn't eat for periods of time and then has larger feedings? Both of those things seem to create the same response. And that would then beg the question, well, like, what pattern makes more sense for you and your life and your goals? Like, what supports your performance mentally, physically, and emotionally? Like, what promotes your well-being? What allows you to connect socially? Like, these things are much more correlated to life than a 72-hour fast twice a year. That's
a life that I don't want to live.
Yeah, exactly. To be honest. More power to you. And like you said, you're not losing years. Like, so we're not looking at the fasting protocols at this time and saying, wow, they really enhance life.
Yeah.
We're looking at them and saying, oh, they may balance out gluttony and excess, but like then you have to like really like dig further in and go like, okay, well, why am I like living in extremes? Is that actually a value add to my personal existence? And the answer is allowed to be yes, but it's probably no for most people.
Yeah, I like that. We're ready for rapid fire.
Ready.
All right, I'm going to grab my laptop so I have it in front of me. Okay, rapid fire. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had 2 turkey, bacon, and egg breakfast burritos and hot sauce with a little cup of pineapple, blueberries, strawberries, and raspberries.
Oh, I like that.
And Core Power in my coffee.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. That's a good breakfast. Are you a nighttime snacker?
I am not anymore. So no is the rapid fire. I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to give context.
Does cooking your food make it lose its nutrients?
Ooh, depends on the food and how you cook it.
Okay. What's one word to describe your approach to health?
Moderation, so vanilla, but moderation.
I like it. Good. That's all I had.
Those were the rapid fire ones?
You're 35. I mean 34.
I'm in the early mid-30s. Thank you very much. Wow. Are any of those, can we go back on any of those and talk about any of them?
Of course. You mean like right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Which one?
Provide some context. Please. What were they again?
What did you have for breakfast this morning? Was that the one you wanted to add context to?
Probably not.
Nighttime snacker?
Oh, wait. The first one I will say, that is my breakfast / post-workout, because I work out in the morning early fasted. And so I like to,
very cool.
It's part of the reason why it's usually like a 800 to 1,000 calorie breakfast for me. It's a big meal.
I'm glad I didn't ask you the other question, which is going to be, what's your go-to post-workout meal? Because it tends to be
that. It's some sort of, it's that, or it's like a double stack of Kodiak cakes with turkey bacon and berries. Sometimes I'll do breakfast sandwiches instead of breakfast burritos. That's one of the options.
I like that.
But yeah, it's usually
in case specific meal prep.
Particularly on the weeks
plug.
that I'm traveling. Yeah, shameless plug. This morning's breakfast was brought to you by Case Specific Meal Prep. Their turkey bacon breakfast burritos are life. And their English muffin breakfast sandwiches, we get the English muffins from this local group named Michael's, and they like bake rosemary and sea salt into the English muffins, and they're like the softest and most fluffy. Oh my God, I love them so much.
The tofu bacon breakfast sandwich is incredible. And I'm not like a tofu bacon person, but it's so good.
Dom's background, he's our head chef for those that don't know. His background, he's been all over. Like he's made, like true like barbecue meats down in North Carolina, and then he's like run vegan restaurants. Like dude He can.
He's multifaceted.
Yeah, that's why we have that pulled pork, and it's like a 12-hour slow marinated, slow roasted in-house pulled pork, and then we have like tofu bacon. It's incredible, and it's just like the dude's. He's an absolute champion. But their breakfast sandwiches, especially when I travel, it's one of my favorite things to grab. It's so easy, and then I just buy fruit and produce for the week. And the other ones are usually what I make for myself.
I love that you mentioned that, because like all of my clients, I always prompt them to talk about this. Like they always want to know, what should I eat when I'm traveling? And I'm like, I could kind of care less. What are you eating when you get back? How are you preparing for that week ahead when you get back on a Sunday night?
Yeah. And there's kind of two ways I do it, right? There's the delegate version, which is I order case specific meal prep meals, and I will order breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the week. So basically that'd be 5 breakfasts, 5 lunches, 4 dinners, because usually Friday night's a night out. And so that's like the easiest one, is just delegate. And then I'll have Whole Foods deliver a bunch of fruits and vegetables. I'll like add extra salad, add some extra berries, add some bananas. So that's like my ultimate delegate. Because I work late a couple nights a week, I tend to order at least some meal prep meals for those 2 nights. I like to have dinners those days. But the other version is I will do like a grocery delivery. I've tried all of them, but Whole Foods, you can pick like 1 hour increments. And I have, Amazon Prime, and I have an Amazon credit card. So it gives me 5% off and 5% cash back. So I get 10% off the groceries.
Not a sponsor.
Yeah, not a sponsor, but like, why wouldn't I do that? But it's nice because like whenever I'm getting home, I'll pick the hour after I get home. And so I'll like be home, and then there'll be groceries. And so if I'm cooking, I will do grocery delivery if I'm gone on Sunday. I think that's what it comes down to. And to your point, I think a lot of people mess this up because like they don't think about the fact that the day that they typically would buy food and prep food, they're gone. And so like if I'm getting home Sunday night, I've lost the time that I would grocery shop and also grocery prep. And so, I will, if I'm getting home late Sunday, I at least order groceries. But I do find that like subsidizing it with CSNP meals is sometimes a really nice combo, and obviously such a privilege. But there's definitely kind of 2 ways to do it.
Sometimes thing, it's not can be affordable for people on an occasional basis.
And I will say out loud, the amount that I spend on a full week's worth of CSNP meals is almost identical to the dollar that I spend at the grocery store. And I get more variety, and it saves me how many hours. So it really isn't as costly as you would expect. Now, when you have kids, there's some considerations if you're buying for kids, I would say. But even then, how many parents are like, I just don't have time to make my food because I'm cooking for them. And it's like, well, you could just do this instead. And then people that order out instead, it's like going to be way cheaper than your current order out budget. So like there's a lot of value where you start to look at it and you go, it's not actually as expensive as we think it's going to be. But yeah, I travel a lot these days. And so I've been definitely better at like grocery delivery if I'm in the mood to cook all week, or partial grocery delivery and meal prep combo, which has kind of been my personal favorite.
That's cool.
Get some good variety.
I also Instacart to the hotel when I'm traveling.
I love
Not
that.
for every meal, but like I like to have those little mush overnight oats.
Oh yeah, they're great.
Like yogurts, very like protein shakes.
Yeah, like those key things. Sometimes even just having like the heavy hitters or the key players or the protein available, it's a major key. It makes
such a difference in how you feel like throughout your travels. Was there something else you wanted to circle back to?
I think it was the
cooking your food. Does it make it lose its nutrients?
There was one before that. What was the second thing you asked me?
Are you a nighttime snacker?
That one. I think I wanted to provide context with that. So I think that one's kind of fun. I'm not anymore. For me personally, it was something I used to eat dinner very late. But I'm talking like since high school. I ran cross country in high school, and cross country practice was 5:30 to 7:30.
I remember these days myself.
Yeah, but that was like instead we didn't have 3 o'clock practices; we had 5:30 practices, and so I'd go run 10 miles, and then I would like drop friends off at their houses, and then I'd get home at 8. And you're not hungry right after a 10-mile run, so then you go up and you shower and you get ready, and then it's 9 o'clock, and now it's like dinner time. And so I got into a habit in high school that like I usually didn't want dinner foods at dinner time, so I would eat them at lunch, and then I would eat like a giant bowl of cereal with bananas and blueberries and all that kind of stuff, or
your body's just like, carbs, please.
Yeah, give me the carbs, give me the protein, and give me something that digests within reason. And so I got used to 9 o'clock dinners in high school, and then in college I worked in the evenings until 7:30, and a lot of times I'd go lift afterwards, and so I'd get home at 10, and once again it was a post-workout. So I had from like age 13 to age 23, I was like eating dinner at night, And then I started this business in my early 20s. And by the time I was 23, 24, I was working until 7 or 7:30. And so dinners were late. And then I started working until 9, and then dinners were later. And in my mid 20s, I started to get like really bad heartburn. I'd get heartburn when I woke up, and then I wouldn't be hungry in the morning. And so it triggered this thing where I didn't want my breakfast anymore, because I was always a big breakfast person. And so then I'd eat later because I wasn't getting breakfast. And I think a lot of people can resonate with this, where they're like, I'm not hungry in the morning. So then they eat later. Well, then they're ravenous at night. So then they overeat at night, which is why they're not hungry in the morning. And so I finally did in my late 20s, I finally did what I call a TFB, too effing bad. And I just went to bed hungry one night. And then I woke up hungry the next day and made a big breakfast. And I've been eating 1,000-calorie breakfasts ever since. And I've worked my way back to bigger and bigger breakfast. And I find that if I am done more than 2 hours before bed, I'm fine. If I'm done 3 hours before bed, I feel fantastic. My sleep is deeper. Like my Whoop strap even shows it. My amount of REM sleep, my amount of deep sleep. If I get 2 to 3 hours, which is how long it takes our stomach to empty, how long it takes our insulin to go down, and insulin and growth hormone oppose each other. And so if you're spiking your insulin right before bed, your growth hormone is going to get suppressed and you're not going to sleep as deeply. So I don't think I want to provide context to why people there's that fear mongering of you can't eat at night. It's
you can't eat past 8 p.m. because Kim Kardashian said so.
Exactly. And it's you can. I did for years, but there's definitely some considerations. And for me, someone that's prone to reflux, not going to do it. And then also has noticed the depth of sleep as often as I can prevent it. It's not that there's always the occasional night where I eat later than I want, but I try and eat dinner between 6 and 7. And then I try and kind of dinner and done from there, unless there's extenuating circumstances, which again, there's always going to be the exceptions here or there, but I just try and make sure they are exceptions.
Totally. I usually tell my clients it helps to kind of cut off eating at least 2 hours before bedtime, just because gravity works. So if you're laying horizontal, you're more likely to get reflux. And then also that sleep conversation, especially those sugars or refined carbohydrates right before bed can really disrupt your sleep. I used to be a nighttime snacker.
Were you? Yeah.
I was a girl dinner girly before girl dinner was girl dinner. I would because I was school full time, and then we'd usually be working or doing something in the evenings. We'd get home late, and then I'm not hungry enough for dinner, but then would just snack on everything, do a little graze session through my kitchen, and was maybe I should just eat dinner. And it was case-specific meal prep. At the time, it was just getting off the ground. And I would get a few free meals here and there.
Interesting.
And so
talk to them about
that is why I started eating dinner. And then after that, I was all right, time to meal prep. So thank you, case-specific meal prep.
Yeah, knock it into rhythm. Couple considerations for night snacks. If you have crazy intense exercise the next morning, a carb snack closer to bedtime, not a bad idea.
You burn through carbs
while you sleep. Yeah. You burn through carbs when you sleep. And so you wake up with depleted glycogen. So pulsing your glycogen up with a bowl of cereal at night. That's part of the reason why I did it as a runner back then. It was a very good idea.
Yeah.
Type 1 diabetics. If you have your pump and you don't want to risk going down, always pick the small carb snack over these rigid rules. And that's kind of that. I think that's what I'd want to communicate is it shouldn't be this rigid rule. You can't ever eat anything after 7 p.m. It's think about the fact that you are choosing to fuel your body at 9, 10, or 11 p.m. And does that fuel have value? Yeah. And so let's think about the types of value. There's the physical, there's the medical, and then there's also the social, which is it Friday night, the first Friday of summer, and you and your children are at an ice cream place? Then it's probably enjoy that and let that be a very beautiful special event, but also probably don't do it every night.
Yeah.
So it's there's just something, there's always going to be exceptions to the general rule of thumb. But I always say make sure exceptions are actually exceptions.
Mm-hmm. I love what Layne Norton said in a podcast recently, which is I don't have food rules. I have food guidelines.
Yeah. Best practices.
Yeah.
Things that I know set me up to feel my best. I call them baseline, right? I like it as a baseline. It's my autopilot baseline that I know sets me up well. And then I'm a free thinking human being that can make modifications to it. But I also know that if I go 10 days in a row where I'm just modifying and shooting from the hip, I usually feel it.
Yeah.
Body feels more beaten up, bloated, swollen, like body not recovering as well, sleep not as deep. Like I know when I'm off baseline too much. And so there's allowed to be sort of like an intuitive tell there of like, are these habits taking care of me? Are they actually providing me the outcomes that I'd like?
And my clients are always like, but the cravings. And I have like 2 things to say to that. Are you eating enough during the day?
Yeah. Cravings at night means your dinner sucked.
Yeah, or your breakfast was not
or your lunch sucked, or it all sucked.
It's like your body's like catching up on something.
Yep, absolutely.
Or like you've got some like there's some kind of like diet starts tomorrow mentality. Maybe some like issues with your relationship with food.
And definitely worth investigating.
That's always worth investigating too. It's like the thinking I'm not allowed to have it tomorrow that makes you want it more today.
Yep.
So I don't know,
just some good things to inspect.
Some things to chew on.
And that is that idea of like, when I say I don't snack at night, it's not this like rigid rule. It's like, it's definitely like my food flow that makes me feel my best is generally a 9, noon, 3, 6. It's like, and I don't have alarms on my phone, and I don't like have a panic attack if it's 6:03, but it's like, I know when my day is flowing right, 9-ish, noonish, 3-ish, 6 to 7-ish range. And if that's not happening, that likely means I am deprioritizing my self-care, saying yes to too many things, and I'm overstressed and overwhelmed. And so I'm not criticizing the food at that point. I'm criticizing my time management, and I got to get my shit together.
I think a lot of people could relate to that.
I think that's a very relatable statement, right? It's like, oh, my food falling off means I need to get my shit together.
I call it the check engine light.
Ooh, I like that a lot. Yes, exactly.
Sweet. Well,
I think that was the one I wanted to go back on. I don't remember what the other ones were.
It was like just cooking your food, you lose its nutrients. But I honestly would love to save that for like
let's save that one, because that there's like my response was spot on. It's like depends on the food and how you cook it. So sometimes yes. Generally speaking, much less than people perceive. The thing I will caveat for our future episode on it is it never does to the point that it's not worth eating it.
Right. Probably don't worry about it is my answer.
That'd be the caveat there. And then what was the last one?
I don't remember. What was it? It was what's one word to describe your approach to health?
Yep. And I gave moderation. I was trying to think of a word that would also be like kind of like sway, which is like kind of like that idea. I love the idea of
flexibility, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I always give that analogy of sway like a skyscraper, right? It's that idea that people don't realize the Sears Tower was like engineered to sway up to 40 feet each direction in the wind, because it being completely rigid would cause it in the winds that are high in Chicago, they would actually compromise the structure and lead to it cracking. And so it's stronger because it sways. And I think that having sway is probably one of the most important things you can do, is like having a baseline, but not being so rigidly attached to it. I've also been trying to flesh out this idea. I call it the health performance aesthetic Venn diagram.
Ooh.
And it's this idea that health and performance and aesthetics are not the same thing, but we walk around and act as societally as if they are, right? So people are pursuing a certain look and aesthetic
and equating it with health
and performance. But it's like, I hate to tell you, the 4% body fat dude on Men's Health, he's not performing his best, he's not his strongest, and he's not his healthiest. And so it's that idea of like, they definitely overlap, right? If you are optimizing your health and performance, your aesthetic is going to benefit, right? Like if you are pouring into your performance, your aesthetic and your health are going to benefit to some degree, but there's a point at which each one of them becomes their own thing, right? So only focusing on aesthetic sacrifices health and performance. Only focusing on performance tends to sacrifice aesthetic and health. Think about the power lifters. Right? Like they are trying to be so strong. That is all that matters. And their aesthetic is Shrekish, right? And their health is nowhere to be found. I mean, there are bodybuilders. Jay Cutler was quoted saying, "He who dies biggest wins." Right? Like that's an abandonment of health in the name of aesthetic, or an abandonment of health in the name of performance. And then it's funny because I always joke, like if you were only focusing on health, you would likely be that little teeny Indian man that lives to 118 years old. And like, that's not aesthetically what you're aiming for, nor is it a performance metric. And so it's sort of that visual of any one of them by themselves is not actually the goal. But I've been encouraging clients to like think about of those three things, like what's your number 1, 2, and 3? So for me, it's health, performance, aesthetic. Health is my number 1, performance is my number 2, and aesthetic is my number 3, which means I'm not going to sacrifice health or performance in the name of my aesthetic. I will let my aesthetic be a result of my health and performance. And so I'm going to be fit like an athlete, right? But I'm not going to be shredded like an Instagram model. And it's because Instagram models have abandoned health and or performance, likely both, in the name of aesthetic. Their number 1 is aesthetic. And then what I'll say to anybody listening is, order them and then ask yourself, are your daily actions supporting that order? Because most people out there are putting aesthetic as number 1 in their actions, even though health is their number 1 on their list. And so if your health is your number 1 and your performance is your number 2, like it is for me and like it probably is for most, recognize your aesthetic is a side effect of optimal health and performance. And there's an acceptance that there's a genetic component there, which means you may not be 6'4" and 226 pounds and 4% body fat at optimal health and performance. Right?
It's like they're not mutually exclusive, but they're also not mutually inclusive.
Yes. And that's why it's the Venn diagram, right? They have the 3 circles, and like there's a point where all 3 of them interact. There's a point where each of them interact in a dichotomous way. And then there's the point where all 3 of them are just independent. And so I've been like working on that in my head. And so like when you asked me about like what my view is, that is something that I've been thinking about. And for me, it's health, performance, aesthetic. And I've been trying to ask myself, are my daily actions in alignment with that hierarchy?
Sounds like an episode. I like that. Do you want to hear my word?
Yes, please.
Okay. I was thinking about this, and I feel like this is like relates to a lot of other aspects of life too, but my one word that describes my approach to health as a dietitian and also like my own life, intention. Intention, because
I love that word.
I think like something that's inherently healthy in like popular culture could be unhealthy depending on your intention. And
so beautiful.
It's something I talk to my clients a lot about, especially in the disordered eating space, because they'll say something like, but I thought exercise was healthy. You're telling me I'm doing too much of it? And I'll say, well, I think your intention with this exercise is somewhat unhealthy. So let's reframe your relationship with it. And that same could be said for your food choices. Like you could make a egg omelet with veggies, and that could be with the intention of like, this is what I like, this is what helps me feel my best, and I know that this meets my nutrition metrics for this meal. Or it could be, well, I'm not allowed to have bread, so I can only have eggs with it. You know what I mean? Like the same action with different intentions looks very different, and
it has very different outcomes,
very different implications.
I wish I could steal your word because it's that good. That's definitely a beautiful one. I just said to someone the other day, I just said to someone literally last week, I don't judge actions, I judge the intentions behind them. And that's not just specific to food, right? It's like, I mean, just think about like socially speaking, like what are the intentions behind an action? That's like very telling about what it meant, right? Was it actually a good thing or a bad thing? But I think when you zoom into the health lens, what the intention is extraordinarily important. It's probably the most important part of it.
This is like another like Lane Norton reference, but he gave this example of, he was at a weekend cabin trip, I think, with friends, and one of the friends that was there was a psychologist. And at the end of the weekend, she was like, you know, you're very interesting. And he was like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, well, you had the amethyst omelet for breakfast, but then you had a sticky bun for dessert later, and then you went out and you ran a few miles the one day, and then you just did nothing the next. You're supposed to be this like health and fitness guy. Like it's not adding up. There's like a lot of like conflict here, things that are like not making sense together. And he was just like, well, it's just what I like to do, right? He's like, I like sticky buns, but I also like eating a healthy breakfast, and I also like moving, and I also like to just kind of rest some days. So it's like, I just think that.
I love that. It's so funny because when she says it's not adding up, my comment would be, maybe you're doing the math wrong.
Yeah.
That sounds perfectly balanced to me. And that goes back to, there's this view that health in our society is purely and unabashedly restrictive. And that is just like untrue. Like that is not health. That is actually unhealthy in most instances. And so that's so funny. You have someone like him he's like literally one of the highest, he's a master's level power lifter, right? He's like nationally ranked.
PhD in nutrition.
Yeah. So his performance is through the roof, right? He's extraordinarily healthy, and he has a very good relationship with food, where he's able to prioritize a delicious meal because he likes to nourish himself. He loves to move his body, but he's also not afraid to participate in a social event with people. And the comment is, you're not being healthy, and it's like, oh, maybe he's being the level of healthy that you didn't even know existed. Maybe you need to level up your knowledge.
His actions weren't consistent with her expectations of what a nutrition fitness person should be like. And I would say that, like, I experience that on a daily basis.
All the time.
The fact that I like to bake, and I brought you a lemon bar today, and like I had lunch, dessert yesterday, like, might not add up to what people would expect from a dietitian. But
what was the intention behind it? What's the relationship to it, right? Did you allow it to hold all this power over you and make you feel guilty and lead you to then binge on the entire box or the entire pan of something, right? Is it what you do all the time, and as a result you're constantly ravenous and gradually overeating and overeating and overeating? Like, again, it's any one action is very, very, just like any one food is hard to judge, any one action is hard to judge. Like, we are complex humans that make lots of decisions. And when you look at someone like Elaine Norton or you or me, what you'll see is a very, very intentional, your word, balance. And the walking that tightrope, I would argue, is the actual goal, right? People like swing wildly across the pendulum between hyper rigid restriction and then like a massive case of the efforts. And it's like, at what point are you going to realize that, like, the actual win is when you get off that swing and you start doing it right?
I always tell my clients too, like, there is going to be some level of sway,
like a skyscraper,
but it's not going to be these huge dramatic.
No 1 to 10. We got to get that 4 to 7 energy going, right?
This is great.
I know you and I could do this all day. So this was a fun episode for my birthday. I'm very excited about it. And I think a good way to wrap up our season. We had quite the season 4 this year.
I know. I really like where it's gone.
I really enjoyed bringing you on permanently as the co-host. I think the overarching response from listeners was very positive too. People seem to really like that.
Because I'm so good looking, isn't it?
Yeah, it's probably that.
Sorry.
I was going to say, set me up to get canceled. It's a trap. I think it's because you have a big brain, and I also think it's because they probably they get a break from me, which is really good.
I like the dynamic big time.
I agree.
So thank you.
This has been fun.
Looking forward to next year, next season.
I was going to say, our next meeting is to go in and brainstorm. And so what we'd ask of all of you listeners is to send us your topics. Again, we obviously went through a couple today that that the marketing team and Devon were suspicious that might be of interest to people, and this was meant to be a little rant sampling, and it was fun to do. But it's to say, next season we're probably going to change up some of the video stuff. We love doing the video, and I think we might want to level that up. So we're gonna aim for season 5 to be better than season 4, but some of that betterment starts with you listeners telling us what you're most excited to hear about, and helping us help you navigate this chaotic world of nutrition and wellness.
Alrighty, that's a wrap. Season 4.
End scene.